Imagine standing on the plains of ancient Troy, the mighty walls looming in the distance, the afternoon sun beating down on dusty fields littered with broken chariots, shattered shields, and fallen spears. On one side, the Greek armies stretch out, row upon row of warriors who have sailed across the Aegean Sea, driven by duty, anger, and destiny. On the other side, the proud city of Troy stands firm, its citizens sheltering behind towering ramparts and legendary defenders. The clash between these two worlds has raged for nearly a decade now, leaving fields red and hearts heavy. This is the setting of Homer's The Iliad, an ancient Greek epic centered not just on the Trojan War, but on the intense emotions, loyalties, betrayals, and heroic deeds that make us human. Today, we'll journey through this timeless epic, unraveling its characters, tracing its conflicts, and feeling the full spectrum of human passions that drive these legendary figures toward glory or doom. The story begins in the war's 10th year. At this point, the Greek armies, also called Achaeans, have been encamped outside Troy's fortified walls for what feels like an eternity. They've come to lay siege to the city after the Trojan Prince Paris abducted the beautiful Helen, wife of the Spartan king Menelaus. Her departure sparked a mighty alliance of Greek kings, united under the leadership of the powerful but often prideful King Agamemnon of Mycenae. Among these Greeks stand famous warriors: Odysseus of Ithaca, known for his cunning; Ajax the Great, renowned for his size and strength; Diomedes, fierce and bold; Menelaus, fighting for his lost wife's honor; and above all, Achilles, the greatest warrior of his generation, blessed or cursed with near immortality and unmatched martial skill. By now, the Greeks are weary. Supplies are low, tempers are high, and the prize they are all fighting for, Troy's fall, remains elusive. Imagine the heat of the day as the Achaeans lounge in their dusty encampment, waiting for orders, itching for a breakthrough. It is into this charged atmosphere that Homer introduces us to the central conflict that will shape the course of the narrative: the rift between Achilles and Agamemnon. Though both are on the same side, Achilles and Agamemnon are locked in a struggle over honor and respect. Recently, the Greeks have sacked a neighboring town allied with Troy, and in the spoils, each leader received a captive woman. Agamemnon took Chryses, Achilles took Briseis. But Chryses' father, a priest of Apollo, prays for his daughter's return. And in response, the god Apollo unleashes a devastating plague on the Greek camp. The disease sweeps through the ranks, killing warriors, weakening morale, and forcing the Greeks to consider appeasing Apollo. They realize that restoring Chryses to her father might lift the curse. However, Agamemnon, driven by pride, refuses at first. When he's finally pressured to give her up, he decides to compensate himself by seizing Achilles' captive, Briseis. This act is more than just taking a woman. For Achilles, it's an assault on his very honor. Achilles, who has fought valiantly and earned glory and respect, sees this as a personal insult. To understand Achilles' rage, consider his role. He fights because glory is the closest thing to immortality, and honor is the currency by which a hero's name lives on forever. By taking away his prize, Agamemnon demeans Achilles' status and worth. Achilles' reaction is explosive. In a passionate confrontation, Achilles nearly draws his sword to kill Agamemnon on the spot. The tension is palpable, the greatest warrior on the brink of murdering his own commander. Only the intervention of the goddess Athena, who invisibly restrains Achilles, prevents Greek-on-Greek bloodshed. Humiliated and furious, Achilles withdraws from battle. He refuses to fight for Agamemnon any longer, calling on his mother, the sea nymph Thetis, to persuade Zeus, king of the gods, to punish the Greeks by letting the Trojans gain the upper hand. Achilles effectively abandons his comrades, retreating to his tent with bitterness in his heart. This decision will shape the course of the war in ways no one yet foresees. In the world of the Iliad, mortal affairs are never entirely separate from the divine. The Olympian gods watch, intervene, and bicker among themselves. Zeus, mighty and stern, tries to maintain some semblance of fate's balance, while Hera, Athena, Aphrodite, Ares, and others take sides, often favoring one faction or hero over another. The Trojan War, in this telling, isn't just human bravado. It's a stage on which the gods play out their rivalries and dramas. Thetis's plea to Zeus is granted. Zeus decrees that without Achilles' spear and shield on the battlefield, the Greeks will start losing ground. Suddenly, the emboldened Trojans push forward. Picture the dusty plains coming to life with Trojan chariots sweeping through Greek lines, arrows raining down on once confident warriors. The Greeks, without their champion Achilles, begin to flounder. As Achilles sulks in his tent, the narrative zooms in on various leaders trying to rally the Greeks. Agamemnon, Menelaus, Odysseus, and others call musters, attempt strategies, and try to fortify their weakened defenses. The battles that follow are not mere skirmishes. They are brutal tests of endurance, skill, and courage. In the thick of it all, we meet heroes from both sides in vivid detail. Diomedes, who at one point is granted extraordinary strength and fury by Athena and even dares to wound the gods themselves. Odysseus, always quick-witted, saving warriors and restoring order where chaos reigns. And the towering figure of Ajax, a human fortress holding the line. On the Trojan side, Hector emerges as the noblest champion, eldest son of King Priam and brother to Paris. Hector is a loving husband and father who fights for the honor and safety of his city. Unlike Paris, who started this whole war by abducting Helen and prefers to linger in the comfort of his chamber, Hector tirelessly leads Trojan attacks. He's the backbone of Trojan resistance, admired by friends and respected by foes. Here, the poem shows us Hector's deeply human side. He has doubts, fears, and loves. He understands that Troy might not withstand the Greek onslaught forever. Yet he stands firm, a paragon of duty and courage. These middle segments of the epic are heavy with combat, but also rich in character portraits. Heroes shine and falter. Minor characters step forward and perish, and the cycle of violence grinds on. Each death is described with grim clarity, showing the audience that glory is always purchased at a high price. On these fields, Achilles' absence is keenly felt. The Greeks need him, and yet his pride and wounded honor keep him distant. As the Trojans drive the Greeks back to their ships, panic begins to set in. Trojans threaten to burn the Greek ships, stranding them far from home. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Agamemnon finally comes to terms with the cost of his arrogance. He sends a delegation to Achilles' tent, loaded with promises. If Achilles returns to the fight, he will receive great riches, countless treasures, fine horses, even the hand of one of Agamemnon's daughters in marriage. Most importantly, Agamemnon promises to return Briseis and swear he never touched her intimately. This embassy, led by Odysseus, is one of the most emotionally charged scenes of the Iliad. Achilles receives his old friends with a cold heart. No matter what they offer, his pride feels too deeply wounded. He condemns Agamemnon's arrogance and questions the worthiness of fighting for men who do not respect him. Achilles reveals a profound existential crisis. He reminds the ambassadors that his mother Thetis revealed two possible fates for him. If he stays at Troy, he will die young, but his name will live forever. If he returns home, he will live a long but unremarkable life. The embassy fails, Achilles will not return. Yet in these conversations, we see Achilles' bitterness also reveals a man torn by inner conflict. He is not merely sulking, he is wrestling with destiny itself. The glory he once craved now seems tainted. The war no longer feels like a noble pursuit. Still, he stands firm in his refusal. With Achilles unmoved, the situation for the Greeks worsens. Hector leads a bold Trojan offensive that pushes right to the edge of the Greek camp. Greek walls, hastily built, are crumbling. The Trojans threaten to set the ships aflame. Among the Greeks, despair spreads like wildfire. Now Achilles' closest friend and companion, Patroclus, emerges as a key figure. Patroclus is gentle and compassionate by nature, quite unlike Achilles in temperament, though he's also a capable warrior. He sees the suffering of the Greeks and begs Achilles to relent. If Achilles will not fight himself, will he at least allow Patroclus to wear his armor and lead Achilles' own contingent of soldiers, the Myrmidons, in a battle? The sight of Achilles' armor alone might rally the Greeks and scare the Trojans. Achilles, still unwilling to join the fray himself, grants this request. He gives Patroclus his blessing but warns him, drive the Trojans back from the ships, but do not attempt to storm the city walls. Achilles wants to protect his dear friend from overreaching. This moment is crucial. The two men share a bond that transcends the ordinary warrior's camaraderie. There is deep love, whether viewed as platonic brotherhood or something more, between Achilles and Patroclus. Patroclus enters the battle wearing Achilles' shining armor, and the battlefield explodes with renewed energy. The Greeks rally, believing their mightiest champion has returned. The Trojans fall back, and Patroclus, caught in the elation of victory, presses onward. He forgets Achilles' warning and pursues the Trojans up to the very gates of Troy. It is here that Patroclus encounters fate. The Trojan prince Hector confronts him, and in the struggle that follows, helped by the god Apollo who strikes Patroclus and disrupts his defenses, Hector delivers the fatal blow. Patroclus falls, and the Greeks lose not only a brave warrior, but Achilles' cherished friend. When news of Patroclus' death reaches Achilles, the emotional force of the moment is devastating. Achilles is overwhelmed by grief. His anger, once directed at Agamemnon, now finds a new target, Hector and every Trojan who stands by him. The death of Patroclus ignites a kind of berserker rage in Achilles. The old dilemma that kept him from fighting, his pride, his argument with Agamemnon, fades to insignificance. Now, nothing matters except avenging his friend. Thetis, Achilles' divine mother, senses her son's despair and visits him. She commissions Hephaestus, the god of the forge, to craft magnificent new armor for Achilles, as his old set was taken by Hector from Patroclus' body. The new armor is a masterpiece. Its shield is inlaid with intricate designs depicting the cosmos, towns at peace and war, fields being plowed, vineyards harvested, images that reflect the entire human condition. This shield symbolizes a universal perspective that Achilles has yet to fully grasp. Life encompasses more than the battlefield, and human existence is a tapestry of joy, suffering, creation, and destruction. Armed now with divine armor, Achilles emerges to fight again. The Greeks, seeing him at last, are inspired to regroup. The Trojans, faced with Achilles' return, quake with fear. Even Hector, brave as he is, feels the weight of Achilles' wrath. Before rejoining the battle, Achilles and Agamemnon reconcile. Agamemnon gives a speech blaming delusion sent by the gods for his earlier actions and reaffirms Achilles' honor. Achilles, however, is too consumed by fury to care much about apologies. His only thought is vengeance. Achilles' return to the battlefield is terrifying. He rages through Trojan ranks like a wildfire, cutting down warriors left and right. Here, the poem does not shy away from brutality. Achilles becomes almost godlike in his killing spree, but also loses some of his humanity. He doesn't just fight, he slaughters. His anger is so intense that at one point, the very river Scamander, choked with the bodies of slain Trojans, protests Achilles' fury and attempts to drown him in its currents. It takes the intervention of gods to save Achilles from the angry river. This scene is symbolic. Nature itself rebels against Achilles' extreme violence. In this carnage, the poem illustrates a profound theme. Achilles' heroic excellence, his arete, has turned into something monstrous. His wrath, once personal, now threatens to unbalance the natural and moral order. We see both the greatness and the horror of an unchecked hero. Achilles' greatness is unquestionable, but his compassion is diminished. Eventually, Achilles confronts Hector outside the walls of Troy. This is one of the epic's most anticipated showdowns. Hector, knowing the gods have abandoned him, still stands firm. Yet when he finally faces Achilles, fear overtakes him and he runs around the city walls 3 times, Achilles in relentless pursuit. It is the goddess Athena who tricks Hector by taking the form of his brother Deiphobus, convincing him to stop running and turn to fight. Realizing he is alone and betrayed by the gods, Hector faces Achilles bravely, trying to bargain that the victor will return the loser's body for proper burial. Achilles refuses. No mercy will be given. They clash in a flurry of spears and swords, but Hector is doomed. Achilles' spear finds its mark in Hector's throat, and Troy's greatest defender falls. Hector's last request, to have his body returned to his father Priam, is coldly denied. Achilles ties Hector's lifeless body to his chariot and drags it in the dust before the walls of Troy, magnifying the Trojans' grief. This savage act horrifies even some of Achilles' own allies. Hector was a noble enemy, a man of honor, courage, and love for his family and city. His murder and mistreatment break the heart of Troy and signal a grim future. Inside Troy, King Priam, Queen Hecuba, and Hector's wife Andromache weep. The loss of Hector feels like the very soul of Troy has been ripped away. Achilles, for his part, is still not satisfied. The anger that drove him to kill Hector lingers. Each day, he drags Hector's body around Patroclus' funeral pyre. The gods, disturbed by this desecration, protect Hector's corpse from decay and mutilation. Something must give. Achilles has reached the pinnacle of vengeance, yet he finds no peace. In one of the most emotionally resonant moments of the entire epic, the aged King Priam of Troy sneaks into the Greek camp at night. With the guidance of the god Hermes, Priam passes through enemy lines and enters Achilles' tent unarmed. Here, the scene is intensely poignant. Priam kneels before Achilles and kisses the hands that killed his son. Imagine the raw humanity of that gesture. Priam begs Achilles to return Hector's body. He does not come with threats or weapons, but with sorrow. Priam appeals to Achilles' own sense of loss, reminding him of his father, Peleus, waiting anxiously for his son's return. Just as Peleus would grieve if Achilles died, so Priam grieves now. This encounter transforms Achilles. The final barrier of his anger cracks. He looks upon Priam and, moved by empathy and the shared pain of mortal life, agrees to return Hector's body. In this moment, the great hero rediscovers his humanity. Vengeance yields to compassion. Achilles weeps with Priam, uniting them in a bond of shared grief. He orders his servants to wash and prepare Hector's body with dignity, unseen by Priam, to spare the king the agony of seeing his son's bruised flesh. Achilles promises a temporary truce for Hector's funeral rites. As Priam departs with Hector's body, we sense that Achilles, in letting go of his rage, has grown as a human being. He has confronted the most difficult lesson of all, that suffering touches everyone, friend or foe, and that mercy and empathy are as heroic as any feat of arms. The story concludes not with the fall of Troy, but with Hector's funeral. The Trojans, allowed a reprieve, mourn their prince and prepare his body for cremation and burial. The city's sorrow is deep and lingering. Andromache laments the future of their son, Astyanax, who will grow up without a father. Hecuba and Priam grieve for their beloved son, who once stood as their greatest hope. Helen, too, speaks fondly of Hector, who treated her kindly despite the calamity her presence brought upon Troy. By ending with Hector's funeral rather than a final Greek victory or the famed Trojan horse, which occurs later in the cycle of Trojan War myths, not in the Iliad, Homer's poem focuses on the cost of war, the universality of loss, and the delicate fabric of empathy that can emerge even between enemies. The poem closes with a line, "Such was the burial of Hector, breaker of horses," leaving the audience to reflect on the tragedy and humanity on both sides of this conflict. Although the Iliad is set in a distant mythical past, the themes resonate powerfully through time. Central is the concept of Kleos, glory achieved in battle, and the tension between a glorious but short life and a long, unremarkable existence. Achilles' struggle with this dilemma is a defining arc of the poem. When he withdraws from battle, he questions the worth of glory if it is not accompanied by respect and honor. Patroclus' death forces him to confront the price of pride, and ultimately, through empathy for Priam, Achilles learns that compassion and understanding can transcend hate. The epic also explores the role of fate and the gods. Warriors like Hector and Achilles may be the best of men, but they are still at the mercy of forces beyond their control. Fate weaves through every choice, every battle. The gods, while powerful, are capricious and often mirror human pettiness. Ultimately, human beings stand between divine whim and mortal frailty, forced to find meaning and virtue in a cruel world. Honorable conduct and the treatment of enemies emerge as profound moral questions. Hector's nobility contrasts with Achilles' vengeful brutality, forcing us to ask what truly makes a hero. Is it strength and skill alone, or the ability to show mercy, recognize shared humanity, and honor the dead, even when they wore enemy armor? The Iliad suggests that heroism is complicated and that the greatest warriors must also grapple with moral and emotional complexity. We also see reflections on war's nature. The Iliad does not glamorize violence. It shows how war consumes lives, dreams, and communities. The battlefield scenes are vivid and bloody, and the camera of Homer's narrative often lingers on the pitiful details of a wounded soldier's final breaths. The poem acknowledges that while war can bring glory and fame, it also brings unspeakable sorrow and loss. In the figure of Achilles, first prideful, then enraged, then remorseful, and the figure of Hector, brave, loving, doomed, we encounter the immense emotional stakes of warfare. Both sides suffer losses. Both sides claim heroes. In this light, the poem becomes a meditation on the shared vulnerability of all human beings. While the Iliad takes place in a semi-mythical time, it was passed down orally through generations of storytellers before being recorded in writing. It reflects the values and concerns of the ancient Greeks, the importance of honor, the impermanence of life, the pursuit of glory, and the influence of fate and the gods. The epic tradition that the Iliad represents influenced countless works of literature, shaping the idea of the heroic narrative. Its characters, particularly Achilles, remain archetypes of the conflicted hero, capable of immense greatness and crippling weakness. The poem structure, beginning in the 10th year of the war, focusing on a short period in the conflict rather than retelling the entire Trojan saga, allows it to explore characters' inner worlds. The Iliad does not end with a neat resolution. Troy still stands at the end of the poem. Achilles still faces a fate leading to an early death. The Greeks have not returned home. Instead, Homer focuses on a snapshot of the war that reveals universal truths about human nature: pride, loss, love, anger, fear, and reconciliation. As a modern reader or listener, immersing yourself in the Iliad is like stepping into a world both familiar and foreign. Yes, the warriors wear bronze armor and wield spears, and the gods descend from Olympus to metal. But the emotions, the grief of a father losing a son, the rage of a man betrayed by a leader he once respected, the bond of friendship strong enough to defy death, these feel immediate and real. By the end, we've witnessed how great heroes like Achilles and Hector confront destiny. We've seen how the thirst for glory can lead to unforgivable cruelty. We've felt a quiet power of kindness that can break through cycles of violence, as shown when Achilles finally surrenders Hector's body. The Iliad does not preach simple lessons. It offers a tapestry of human experience, leaving us to draw our own conclusions about honor, empathy, mortality, and meaning. The story of the Iliad is a grand, sweeping epic, but it's also a deeply human one. Against the backdrop of a mythic war that shaped an ancient civilization's imagination, we find men and women fighting not only enemies with swords and spears, but their own fears, desires, and fates. We see how pride can spark conflict even among allies, how grief can transform a hero into a monster and then back again, and how compassion can bridge the chasm between warring sides, if only for a moment. When you finish the Iliad, you come away knowing the characters intimately. Achilles, the greatest warrior who learns too late that compassion matters more than wrath. Hector, the noble defender of his city who meets his tragic end with dignity. Priam, the bereaved father who dares to appeal to an enemy's humanity. And countless others who fight and die, shining briefly in the poet's eye before darkness closes over them. You also carry forward the epic's central question. What does it mean to be human in a world defined by struggle, mortality, and the search for lasting meaning? Just as Achilles and Priam found a moment of shared understanding, we too, centuries later, find ourselves sharing the emotional truths woven into Homer's words. Through the dust and spears of battle, through the lamentations of the mourning and the prayers of the hopeful, the Iliad endures as a story that speaks to the core of human experience, an ancient voice reminding us that compassion, honor, and empathy matter, perhaps most profoundly when all else seems lost.